What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 585. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line from a foot of snow in Denver, Colorado, it is Luis Scott-Vargas. Did you get out there and what do you have to do in places that snow a lot? You have to shovel?
Yeah, so
like legally or something?
Yeah, you have 24 hours from when the snow stops falling to clear your sidewalk. They don't care if you clear like the path up to your door, but you should also do that for your own convenience and especially the convenience of people delivering stuff. But I try to do it on the day of if I, as soon as possible for a few reasons. One, it's just really inconsiderate not to do that. Like I took the dog on a walk today, and every time I ran into someone who hadn't shoveled their sidewalk, I had to like go around it or backtrack because it's like a foot of snow.
Right.
And then the other is that if I found this out the hard way, if you wait too long, because Colorado is really sunny, it just turns into ice, and then it's like impossible to get off. And if you shovel it while it's just powdery snow, it's annoying, but it takes 20 minutes and then you're done.
Where do you put the snow?
My neighbor's car, mostly.
They come out to 4 feet of snow on their car.
No, I just toss it onto our front lawn, which is also just covered in snow.
I see, but nobody's walking there, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds. We actually had a snowstorm here last week as well. It was only 2 days, but it was kind of cool to get that experience. But I'm not going to lie, not the worst that it's gone at this point. We've got a lot to talk about on the show this week. We had the arena sealed open on the weekend, and we're going to be going over our experiences with that, kind of putting a little recap on that. We're also going to do a check-in with Kaldheim. Just the format's really kind of settled down at this point. We know a lot of what we're going to know about it, and we wanted to let you know where the format sits right now. Before we get into our main topic, though, let's mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Really exciting stuff always going on over at CFB. And, kind of the latest and greatest coming out of there are box breaks, which are that program where basically it's like a Twitch channel and a part of the CFB website. And it's really cool. You can sign up for a box break, and in which case you're basically buying a portion of a sealed product like a pack or a booster box. And then they'll go on their Twitch channel and open it, and you'll get randomly allotted, like, say, a color. Like you get all the red cards or all the blue cards or whatever. And then they open them up on there, and you get to sweat it out and see what you got. And then they'll send it to you in the mail. It's really fun. And it's also a cool way that if maybe you don't have quite enough in your pocket to be able to get to, a full box of cards, you can get some cards in your hand in kind of a fun way without having to spend the full amount. And yeah, go ahead.
If you're lucky, it could be pretty efficient. You pay for a sixth of the box and take 2/3 of the value.
Yeah, that could happen. By the way, I got my my foil Goldspan Dragon and my not foil Goldspan Dragon in the mail. Thank you very much.
Very nice.
Yeah, it looks like I got lucky on mine. And you can find out, if you will as well, you can go to channelfireball.com/box breaks for all the information. Then they'll have all the upcoming breaks on there so that you can sign up for any of the ones that you want to be a part of over there. The show is, of course, also brought to you by you. It's the Patreon, right? This is the way that content creators can allow people to support them, and that lets them make more stuff, keep making stuff, and stay as dedicated to making the great stuff that you like to consume as they are about making it. So patreon.com/limited resources. Just for being a patron, you get access to a lot of stuff. The Patreon feed, which gives you access to things like the Patreon question of the week and questions for our question and answer shows and any feedback that we want. And also you can message us on there, etc. But then there's also levels that can get you extra cool little perks as well. Patreon.com/limited resources if you want to check that out. Now, our Patreon question of the week actually comes from kind of interesting. I'll just read you the letter. It says, "Hey guys, big fan. I recently played on day 2 of the Kaldheim Sealed event. So congratulations. That's already a nice accomplishment making it to day 2. I was eliminated after I made a huge mental error that literally cost me game 3. It wasn't so much a play mistake I did, although I did make a few of those as well. I basically got caught up in the moment. And even though I was aware of my surroundings and how much time I had, I just did the wrong thing. Ever since then, I've been having a hard time sitting with a loss, and I'm beating myself up over what I should have done differently. My question is, what do you guys do to recover from tough losses or setbacks that could have been prevented? This can apply to Magic or just life in general. I want to stress that this is in no way meant to diminish my opponent. They played impeccably, and to be honest, it was an amazing experience to play against someone whose podcast has taught me so much. Thanks again. Love the show. Sincerely, guy who ran out of time plotting an attack in his turn Game 3 against Marshall, even though all he had to do was just pass the turn since Marshall had 0 cards in his library. So this is from Zach, and this did happen. So this was my first round of the day 2 of the Arena Open, and we played a very grindy, long 3-game match that went deep. There was a lot of really important decision points throughout for both of us, and that left us with not as much clock as you'd hope. Now, for my opponent here that emailed us in, unfortunately for him, it left it with a critically low amount of clock as we were down the stretch in the last game. But when I passed the turn back to my opponent here, they actually had lethal on board, although I did have cards in hand and some mana up, so it wasn't 100% clear that was the case. But perhaps more importantly, was what Zach said here, is I had drawn my last card out of my library on my turn. And so when I passed the turn, I think there was 38 seconds left on their clock, something in that range. And so I think our first focus point here, Luis, is to talk about how you would handle the strategic implications of that. Because Zach's obviously saying, like, look, I'm not looking to make excuses, but what could I have done differently in game? And then how can I handle the fact that I didn't do it in game? Right? Because after the fact, things become much more clear. But when you're caught up in the moment, Luis, it can cloud your judgment.
I mean, the biggest thing I take away from mistakes is I try to frame it so that by making a mistake, it makes it a lot less likely I'll make that mistake in the future. I look at the silver lining. And one of the things I'm really happy about when I make a mistake is, especially if in a spot that's a little less high stakes, obviously making a mistake in a high stakes situation kind of sucks no matter what. I'm not going to say that I don't feel bad about those. But imagine, you're playing day 1 of the Arena Open and you make a mistake that ends your run. Well, the way I look at it is like, hey, you're not going to make that mistake in the future, or you're less likely to. So that's you paid for a lesson. You do a lot of paying for lessons in your life where you realize, oh, wow, I really should carry, the tools to change my tire in my car because this was just a huge pain now that I'm able to do that. Or I need to learn how to do that. Or, I really should shovel my sidewalk before the sun makes it all into ice and it takes me 2 hours instead of taking me 20 minutes. Like, I don't like making mistakes, but you're going to make so many mistakes over the course of your life in Magic and out. You should just try to get as much value from all of them, extract maximum value as always. And that's kind of the way I look at it is the more mistakes I make, the more I'm learning for the future. And then hopefully I'll make fewer mistakes as a result.
Right. And, I think that what makes this maybe not unique, but a rare situation here, right, is the stakes. For players like me and for Zach, I mean, this is basically our Super Bowl, right? This is the big moment for us because we're not regularly playing at the PT level. And, so when you make a mistake there, it can really kind of sit with you, where if you make a mistake that loses you a draft, it might be easier to say, well, I'm really frustrated about that, but I'm going to say, okay, I'm not going to make that mistake again. And, this was a situation, I think, where for my opponent here, you get more accustomed to understanding the big picture stuff and processing that in real time and solidifying it as game actions is kind of what I'm saying. For example, it will not happen again to my opponent here that if they recognize that my library is dead, that they don't just hit auto pass turn. Right? It takes some level of confidence in maybe some experience to be able to say, I'm not even going to attack on my turn. Even though I have lethal, I could go that route, or I'm just going to pass the turn. Maybe the absolute optimal play in case there's something that you didn't think about or something that you weren't aware of in the format is to just attack with all your creatures and then auto pass the turn, right? Let me figure out what I need to do about blocking. And if that doesn't work, then the turn's back over to me and I draw my card and then the game's over. But, Magic is a game of exceptions, right? It's just there's effectively no scenario in Magic that you can't come up with an exception for. And there's always a card in the format that you forgot about that shuffles things back in, or that can do a thing that you didn't realize, or they could untap on their upkeep and then fire 2 burn spells, or, just like these things that like cloud your judgment in these scenarios, right? That make you go, well, maybe I just need to attack, but then am I giving up this other opportunity? And all of a sudden your clock's getting there and your face is starting to turn red because you're getting stressed out. And it's like, oh my God. And, you kind of have one of those mental breaks, right? And that's probably what happened here. I know I've been on the bad end of that as well. And it also gets amplified a bit when it happens to be the tournament that you're, really kind of means a lot to you. And you happen to be playing against somebody who you know of as well, right? That also kind of cranks it up a bit as well. So, there's a lot there for you, Zach, to kind of process through. And I wanted to focus also here, Luis, because this also prompted a discussion on Twitter this week, and you had a really interesting take on it, I thought, about how to deal with these mistakes after the fact. And it touches on what you said just a minute ago, but it does go even a little bit further. And you had a cool take on it, kind of it almost making you feel a little bit better that you had made a mistake and lost in some ways, rather than if it had been out of your hands.
Yeah. So someone asked a kind of similar question, not quite as detailed, but how do you recover from a mistake? And, your answer was, I think, a good one, which is, you said like, yeah, I get pretty frustrated when I make mistakes, but I accept that like mana screw and stuff like that are part of the game, right? That's kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah.
And for me, I actually, one of the upsides, again, I just try to look at the bright side. One of the things that makes me feel better about losing to a mistake is knowing if I played better, I would have won that match, because I actually am less happy in a world where I go 4-2, not making day 2, and I get completely screwed in the both matches I lost. I walk away from that thinking like, you know what, I could have played perfectly, and I could have done everything right, and I still would have lost all these matches because I lost 2 matches to mulling to 5 and never playing my third land. I mean, that's the sort of thing that is not very motivational to me. But when I walk away going 4-2, missing day 2 because I punted a close decision in 2 of my matches, or maybe even just 1, I think, hey, you know what? If I was just a little better today, I would be 5-1 and then I'd be in day 2. Mm-hmm. Or if I had just taken a little more time to think, or just made the play I knew I should make, or didn't get too fancy, or whatever the mistake was, then I would have given myself a better chance and actually might have won. And that actually makes me feel more hopeful in the future, which is when I screw up and lose, it's on me, and it's not the forces of the universe conspiring against me. This is me just making the wrong decision. I should have made that block. I should have known that this rare wasn't as good as I thought it was, and I could have played a little bit more to try to figure that out, or, any of those things. And that means next time, again, this is kind of going back to the original answer, my win percentage is going up. It's just slowly building over time, because I know next time I won't make that mistake. Granted, I've never had to face a mistake as devastating as timing out against Marshall when you had him dead, because that sounds rough. But I think I guess the last thing is, life's going to throw a lot of really frustrating, disappointing things at you. You got to take your licks, and this is a good place to learn them, because at the end of the day, these stakes aren't that high. Like, even if this is the high stakes event you'll ever play, in the highest stakes match you'll ever play, you're going to suffer things in life that are much more frustrating and important. We're still just talking about playing Magic here, and getting practice dealing with disappointment is always a good thing. Like, obviously it's better to not get disappointed. Everyone wants their life to be perfect. It's just not going to be. And the more resiliency you build by taking the loss, feeling really bad, then realizing a week later your life is just not worse as a result, that's a good thing. I remember actually my high school AP biology teacher telling us, because we were all like stressing out about tests and stuff, look, I know this is important to you. I know that some of you are not going to do as well as you'd want on these tests. In 5 years, it won't matter. And that's I've kind of thought about that a lot over the years, where some things that feel like the most important thing in your life, or the most important thing just in this of your day, yeah, they matter in the time, and you obviously are going to get affected by them. But at the end of the day, like, a lot of it just, comes out in the wash, and it's better not to get too worked up over it if you can avoid that.
Yeah. And I really like your approach here too, because you're talking about being able to build up that that sort of resilience to these type of things. But the way that the method that you're actually using to do that is you're using a tool, you're using an ideal or an idea, right, in your head of saying like, well, when I approach this thing that is ostensibly bad, like I made a mistake and it cost me something that I wanted, you're actually just turning that into, learning opportunity or an opportunity for growth or something that says, and I won't be doing that again in the future. Thank you very much. Right. And that's just a hopeful outlook on things. And it's, cause these things are difficult to do as well. Not just the thing you're trying to accomplish, but also viewing it in a way that actually, turns that on its head. So I really like that. And I appreciate the email as well. And, I have to say, I'm really impressed, Zach, that you emailed in, and that's a tough loss to take. And it's an awkward one too, because like clock losses are weird, and there's always just this kind of, I don't know. I felt like you handled it very maturely, and I just wanted to say that I appreciate that about you as well. And thanks for the question. Okay, let's do a crack a pack, Luis.
Yeah.
Hopefully we won't make any mistakes with the crack a pack. Oh God, it feels so good, freaking to have a pack of cards in my hand and smell that sweet.
I think that the last set I interacted with in person, I guess, was Theros. I don't think I've touched a physical card since then.
Unbelievable. I assume you mean original Theros from 2014.
Yes, that's what I mean. I mean original Theros.
All right, first card out is Augury Raven, which has been deemed fine. somehow this is not in the top 3 blue commons. No, we actually gave this card like a B-, I think, in the set review. Like we were very high on it, and it's like solid. It's good.
I still think it's actually like pretty close to that. Blue just has some really good commons. Mm-hmm. It's like C plus B- level. But yeah, it just turns out Mistwalker is the only other card which is close, with Bergstrider and Behold, of course, being much higher, where Mistwalker just does enough things that it's a little better than Augury Raven. But yeah, Blue's got some good commons. I'm not happy to first pick an Augury Raven, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. Next card that's disappointed me a little, it's Grim Draugr. That's the 2 and a black 3/2, and you can pay 1 in a snow to give it +1/+1 menace. Playable, but it is like a good comparison, right? Is Icehide Troll. They're both common. They're both snow payoffs. Troll is a harder one to get going with the double snow, but it changes the board state in many scenarios, and this almost never does.
Yeah.
It's mediocre.
I not found it to be great, but it is playable.
All right, Luis. We were talking about the good blue commons. What's your motto? What's the motto for this set?
ABH, always beholding.
That's the one, buddy. And we got it. So this is already going to be extremely difficult. You were hanging out with me on my stream this week where we had really an offensive run of picks as people were giving me, what was it, pick 6? Behold the Multiverse? Like, what?
Yeah, that was the deck you posted on Twitter where you had like 3 Beholds, a Showdown of the Scalds. Yeah. I think I don't know if you had a Glimpse of the Cosmos. I think you did actually.
I don't think I did, but I can't remember.
But yeah, Behold the Multiverse, we're going to get into the overall top common discussion later and our thoughts on that. But certainly a top 2 common for just about everyone, with Cyril's Packmate being the other card in consideration.
Yeah.
And not a card I'm unhappy at all to first pick.
Yeah, so that's high on the list here. Glittering Frost. Boy, I did my first draft after doing all those seals, Luis, and I almost just like instinctively window slammed a Glittering Frost. And I'm like,
yeah, Replicating Ring and Glittering Frost are both like, ooh, I got there in sealed. And they're still fine in draft, but playable, they're not the same.
Yeah. Your buddy, Priest of the Haunted Edge.
Do like it still, but yeah, clearly worse than both Glittering Frost and Behold the Multiverse.
Yeah,
and Augury Raven actually. So yeah, not a card I'm really interested in taking early. In fact, the deck I want them in is designed specifically to get them late. Otherwise, I don't think the deck's worth going into.
Totally. Elder Leaf Mentor. Boy, this is a really good kind of take a 20-second timeout to recognize how good cards have gotten the average card quality, right? Because Elder Leaf Mentor, the 3 and a green 3/2 that makes a 1/1. Boy, there's not a lot to hate about this. It's even in a theoretically irrelevant tribe, although that deck hasn't really come together. But still, this card should be like a rock solid playable. You should be taking it, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th pick, somewhere in that range. If you base it off of sort of traditional Magic card values, and it's just very medium. Like,
yeah, this card has been quite mediocre, but it
says a lot.
Definitely looked decent.
Yeah, says a lot.
It doesn't help that Elves is not a good tribe, because so much of the power in this card is like making 2 Elves in one card, and there's some decks that look like it could be really good in, but those decks are a lot more rare than you might have thought.
Yeah, for sure. Brine Barrow Intruder, that's the blue 1/2 flash. When it ETBs, you give a creature -2/-0. This is performed a lot worse than the fairy version of it from the last set that did the mill thing. Yeah, not a fan of it. We like this card from the beginning, and it's definitely held up its end of the bargain. Battlefield Raptor, the 1 mana 1/2 flying first strike.
Yeah, this one actually is one of the top white commons.
Yep.
It does what the white decks want. It so happens that the Goldvein Pick in particular, but also even Tormentor's Helm are both pretty good equipment. So like, there's actually just a bunch of good equipment, and then that combined with some light double spell action makes Battlefield Raptor a desirable card for the white decks.
Yep, for sure. Axguard Cavalry. This is the 1 in a red 2/2, and you can tap it to give a creature haste. This absolutely meets the bar of playable. It's like just exactly that. It's a card you can put into your deck.
Yeah.
Roots of Wisdom is our last common. This is the 1 in a green sorcery, and it mills 3, then returns a land card or an elf card from your graveyard to your hand. And then if you can't, which is different from if you don't, if you can't, then you draw a card.
I have not found this card to be good. Yeah. One of the things that comes up with this, by the way, is you can't refuse a land in exchange for a card. It only gives you the card if there is not a land there. Right. So you can brick pretty hard with the card, even though it looks like, oh, you can never miss. But if a land is a miss, this card very easily does.
Yep. And that's just when you're playing a card that doesn't affect the board for 2 mana already, you need to get the most out of it. Uncommons. First one up is Frenzied Raider. This is the 1 in a red 2/2 Demon Berserker. And whenever you activate a boast ability, you put a +1/+1 counter on this guy.
Yeah, I mean, this card has played out pretty well. It works nicely with the usual curve of red boast creatures, but it's certainly worse than Behold the Multiverse.
Yeah, for sure. Our next 2 uncommons are actually both runes. We've got Rune of Sustenance and Rune of Might. So the white one gives lifelink, and the green one gives +1/+1 and trample. I don't know. I've heard you say and a few others that they thought that Rune of Sustenance, the white one, was the best or one of the better runes, but I don't find that to be the case because it doesn't augment power and toughness. So I'm like down on it. I prefer Rune of Might. And the truth of it is that the runes have actually disappointed me a little too, Luis. They looked so free rolly. I remember we talked about the relatively high floor, the ability to just throw it on literal any permanent if you just have to. And then the upside of getting it on an equipment, it's pretty good. And I just never prioritize these, really ever. And they're often that 24th card or something like that where I'm like, well, I can cut this rune, because it doesn't really do that much anyway. Where are you at on the runes?
I like exactly the red and white ones because red-white aggro can utilize them well. There definitely is room to make some sort of like runed crown monstrosity with like Goldvein picks and stuff like that. Deathsy's been experimenting with that and seems to enjoy it. But in general, I still like the white rune. That's the only one that really lived up to its potential, I feel. Mostly the combo with Raven Wings, where if you put a white rune on Raven Wings, it feels like it's really hard to lose those games in any sort of race situation. And even against a control deck, it just makes it so every creature gets in for a little damage and a little life, and then it dies, and it buys you time to draw another creature, and they run out of answers because all your creatures have flying. That said, neither rune is very close to Behold the Multiverse. And overall, yeah, I am lower on the runes than I used to be. The fact that equipment is good, I mean, putting a red rune on a Tormentor's Helm and making it +2/+1 and haste equipment, that is actually fine, even though taking a turn off to do it can be a little cumbersome.
Yeah. I'll mention our land here before we get to the rare. It's Arctic Treeline. That's the green-white snow duel. And so right now going into this, we've got Behold the Multiverse as the clear pick out of the pack. But we did get something kind of interesting here. We got Alrune's Epiphany. And that's the 5 blue sorcery. You get 2 1/1 bird creature tokens with flying. Then you take an extra turn after this one and exile Alrune's Epiphany. And it also has Foretell for 4 blue.
I think that I would still just take Behold the Multiverse here. I do like Alrune's Epiphany, but My experience with the card is mostly that it's 0 mana, make 2/1/1 flyers, draw a card, which is not a bad card, but you can't cast it until like turn 6 through 8, something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's I will admit I have not had enough experience with the card to be like fully confident in this answer, but I suspect Behold the Multiverse is going to be a better first pick.
Yeah, I think if we had our friends over at 17 Lands run the numbers, that putting a Behold the Multiverse in your deck would return a higher win rate than putting an Alrund's Epiphany in your deck. Although Epiphany does do some cool stuff, and it's definitely a powerful card that I would always play in my blue decks, I would take Behold here, I think, if I'm at the PT.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay, so there's the Crack-a-Pack. Where did I? Oh, no, I threw away the... Okay, cool. I need to keep the wrapper because these are going to be used for a webcam sealed battle against my buddy Adam, and I got to keep these packs together. Okay, so let's talk about the sealed open on the weekend, Luis.
Yeah.
First things first, at least anecdotally, they haven't given any numbers or anything about how well it went. It felt like a raging success, didn't it?
Yeah, the thing I liked most was the energy we had this week. I said that on Saturday, where basically all week everyone was talking about the Arena Open. Every podcast or limited writer wrote something about sealed. You know, I did a couple of sealed streams. I know you did some streaming too, and people were really into it. They were really engaged. That's the part that was so cool. It felt like this was a community event. Everyone was excited for it, or at least enough people were that that's what people were talking about. And I didn't realize how much I missed that. Like limited, you know, I don't want to be a broken record here, but limited tournaments just haven't been a thing for like 2 years. It's just a shame. You know, this is something I find, you know, very I'm really unhappy about. Having this was like, wow, not only is this a limited tournament, this is one everyone can participate in, because look, back, you know, in the days of yore when we had Grand Prix events, like we would do sealed before we'd talk about a Grand Prix. Maybe there'd be like 1 or 2 sealed Grand Prix or 3 over the course of a season. But they were always like, you know, they're a physical tournament. There was like, okay, there's going to be a Grand Prix in Phoenix. There's going to be a Grand Prix in Brussels. You know, there's going to be a Grand Prix in Nagoya. Not that many people in the world are going to play in those, and not that many listeners are going to play in them. And yeah, there was like, you know, PPTQs and events like that, but there wasn't anything in this sort of unifying sense where everyone's playing in it and everyone's excited about it because we all have access to it because you can play from your home. And that energy like carried throughout the week, and even on Sunday. Like, I don't know, how many times did you have someone say like, you know, here's my sealed, what would their last cut be? Or I made day 2, thanks for the advice, you know.
It was overwhelming. You know, it was absolutely, if anybody wants to go to me and Luis's Twitter feed and just look at our mentions over the course of the weekend, we were bombarded, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. If, you know, I'm sure I missed plenty of people. If I did, it was not due to any other reason than it was just hard to keep up. But even like looking at my like feed of Twitter, not the ones at me, just like the people I follow, all these people just talking about it and like, oh, look at the sealed I made day 2 with. It took me 3 tries, or I won $1,000, or I went 5-2 on day 2, but you know, it was whatever. And I thought that was a huge success from that part. If like not knowing the numbers, I of course don't have access to how many people signed up or what the average entries were or any of those things, or total entries. It seems like it was a pretty big success. Like I mean, look, our circles are going to be, you know, overrepresented with people who like to play limited. We do a limited podcast. we follow a lot of Magic players, you know, and all that. But I saw people posting on Facebook about it. Like, and I don't interact much there, but there was a lot of people who were really into this, and I can tell you, it gave me a lot of energy and excitement. Just it felt like I streamed more than I even normally would, because I was like, oh, I want to go stream because I know people want to talk about sealed and watch sealed, and they'll come hang out. And that's not even touching like actually playing the event. I'm just talking about straight up, what was the experience of having this event exist? And I thought it was like, from that perspective, a 10 out of 10. We're going to get to more details, but just straight up like unqualified success from what this did to kind of like the limited community that at least I engage with.
Yeah. And you know, the reason that this whole podcast started all those years ago is because Ryan and I felt that limited was the best way to play Magic because of its ability to level the playing field for people that don't have the latest, hottest deck in constructed or whatever, and don't have the time or effort or resources or whatever to put it together, those type of decks and keep up with the metagame and keep getting all the cards, where you can just say, here, I'm going to get these 6 packs and I'm going to battle against somebody, or we're going to sit down and do a draft, and we're all on even footing except for our skill level, right? Which is how it's supposed to be, or at least how it would be ideal, where, somebody's monetary situation isn't the defining factor on whether they win or lose at a game of Magic. And this was that. Like, you just felt it when, everybody was in there. There's a lot of people that aren't used to or don't have the resources to play in high level events, even the arena opens. And, look, this wasn't cheap. The entry fees for this were quite expensive. You do have to still get over the hump. You can't be flat broke and play Magic. I think anybody that's played for any amount of time knows that. But still, the door was open there for, if you could scrap together those gems, you could battle against, you were in the same exact thing as you were, Luis, and as against people in MPL rivals, longtime pros, podcasters like me. Everybody was the same, all in even footing. Here's your sealed pack,
I mean, my sealed was not good. My day 2 sealed, and the people who got paired against me probably had one of the highest win percentages they're ever going to have, in terms of equity when playing against me in a tournament.
Yes, exactly.
Isn't that great?
And that's awesome, right? And and I just really felt that. I mean, I also am making assumptions here because, again, Wizards hasn't and probably won't tell us the numbers on it or whatever. But I was just thinking about it in my head, right? So sealed on Arena doesn't get played very much, and it's not a high EV thing to do for us, gem wise and stuff. Ryan's run the numbers over at Going Optimal, and that is not really where you want to be unless you just like particularly enjoy sealed. But imagine the influx of people testing sealed on there, which I know I certainly did. I did 30 or 40 or whatever, and I never play sealed on there. And then the number of people, because you could enter as many times as you want. I got really lucky and got in on my first one because my first pool was just excellent and really good. But I was planning on being able to play 4 or 5 of them. I had some stuff to do, so it was a little bit hectic of a day. But I was really going to set aside time and be like, I really want to qualify for day 2, and I'm going to set aside the gems and the time to really give myself the best shot. And I know a lot of people who it did take. I mean, I can't imagine it taking 4 or 5 times, for somebody of your caliber, Luis, for example. But, I did hear
it took me 5 times.
I know. I'm trying to tease you here. But yeah, but that's it, right? Like even Luis, he got there on the 5th one. I know a lot of people who did that similar. And then, you make it to day 2 and you get your sealed. But I mean, come on, that had to be a ton of money, right? Like our vote, it has to have been heard that limited is popular. People want to play it. You've got some of your most invested Magic players are super into limited. And I hope the message got into the building loud and clear that this is something that people really want. And it's not just talk. It's not just like, well, I'd like to see this. It's like, I will pay for this. This is actually valuable to me. So I hope that happened. Now, some of the things we should talk about, this was the very first one. My assumption is that we'll have a few more like this, but come on, we've all already got our eyeballs on draft, right? We all know that
sure.
All sealed is not the end game for what we want these limited opens to be. Now, we've had a chance to talk about that on the show, and I'm sure that these things are being talked about inside the building at Wizards. But one thing that stood out particularly was that doing sealed on Arena is really tough. The interface is pretty rudimentary for sealed builds. And it does actually make it a lot harder to figure out what kind of deck you have when you can't really separate things out in an easy way.
Yeah, the sealed deck builder was, I think, one of the least like if we want to look at the pain points of the event, I think there's 2 main ones. The sealed deck builder is the most important one because that's what the format is. It's sealed, and having to play sealed with a really crappy deck builder, or let's not mince words. The deck builder is like a 2 out of 10.
Yeah.
it's hard to see your whole pool at the same time. I mean, you can't it's not easy to share your pool with other people. Because you can't take a picture of it. You can export it and use a third party thing, and that's fine. And it's hard to you can't save multiple decks. So if you are playing best of 3, I mean, one of the things we often advise you to do, right, is to switch decks during sideboarding, because that's something that you should be doing some of the time. Mm-hmm. Well, it's really hard when you can't save your deck, where at least Magic Online, for example, lets you save multiple decks. You just one click and you're switching your deck. So that would be the first thing to fix. I don't have a great solution to that because it just requires a deck builder overhaul, which I know, trust me, I've been involved in this sort of thing for card games. It is not a small task. So I wouldn't hold our breath on that. I mean, unless maybe they're already working on it, and if so, that'd be great. But I suspect this is just not going to change for quite some time. And that was a cost I was willing to pay, but it still was definitely a detraction. The other thing which would help for all these opens is they have a 2-hour sign-up window on day 2, and that's just complete nonsense. I don't know the architecture of the nitty-gritty of why they have to have that for their event to function as in terms of the program. But every single arena open, there's people who miss that sign-up window because it doesn't make any sense. It's an asynchronous tournament. You can play all day whenever you want. Why does everyone need to be signed up by 9 a.m.? It's especially punishing for people in other time zones. We heard from multiple people who were like, yeah, I live in Australia. I would have played in this, but if I could play my day 2 matches near at the end of the time period, which would be a reasonable time for me, I would have. But I didn't want to have to get up at 2 a.m. to sign up and then go back to sleep, mm-hmm. or play my matches then. So
yeah, I had to get up at 6. That was painful. I was able to sign up and then just go crash again, but it's I'm not going to be playing my matches at 6 a.m. It would have been nice to just put that off. Yeah.
So that is, I think, a pretty big quality of life improvement, and there's really no excuse for or justification for having it be that way. Besides, again, that they chose to code it in a way that makes it necessary, which I think is not a good reason, but it could be valid in terms of hey, this is not easy to change. I would understand that. If mm-hmm. hey, this is just baked into the architecture, we can't change this, but it's not a good decision because it doesn't make any sense. So that I think would actually be a pretty significant quality of life improvement, even though it's not a huge blocker to playing at them. But it's pretty frustrating. I know there's people who've made day 2 of one of these things, like an MIQ or something, and then they're like, oh wait, I didn't know I had to sign up by 9 a.m. I don't get to play on day 2, and that's it.
Yeah. What do you think about the draft part? We don't need to go into all the stuff that we had on the prior episode about potential ideas for how to actually implement it. But just from a really big picture perspective, this is doable, right? We should expect that we will have draft things at some point if the demand's there.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's trivial, and we spent a whole episode talking about different ways to solve it. Yeah. And again, I think it kind of goes back again to them willing to maybe push the boundaries of things a little bit of what, rules that they think can't be broken that I think could be. But again, I'm not a stakeholder in the same way they are. So I certainly don't blame them for being conservative. But yes, I imagine we will see draft opens. I think that this is popular enough that we will. And I imagine we'll see more sealed opens. It would be mind blowing to me if I found out this was not a profitable endeavor for them. And that's not even counting how much excitement this drove in terms of Magic. This is the kind of thing that keeps Magic healthy and interactive and engaging for just a lot of your player base. Yeah. The minority of your player base overall, I understand that. Tournament and competitive players are a small fraction, but this mobilizes them to such a large degree that has to be really good for you. And it would be worth spending money on. And this I would imagine generates money. I would be shocked if they had if they built the payouts and the entry fees in this in such a way that this cost them money, because that would be incredibly hard for me to believe. So It seems like an absolute win, as they say. And I expect to see more of them. This was awesome. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I won $1,000 and I was thrilled with that.
We should mention that. Yeah. So you made it into day 2 and then you had a bad pool, but boy, you just scrapped it out. How in the world did you get to the 6 wins with a bad pool? That's incredible.
So my pool wasn't even close to being a a good snow deck, like a good snow control deck.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I had saved my pool. Actually, to plug them, because I feel like we talk about them a lot. I actually signed up for 17lands.com, but I haven't linked my account yet. So I haven't started tracking things, but, my pool was not capable of building a good snow deck. It wasn't capable of building a good deck overall. So, but I did have 4 copies of Run Amok. And I had Varagoth, the 2/3 Boast, Vampiric Tutor Death Touch guy. And I had Draugr Necromancer. This is what I was working with. Okay. So I built a black-red mid-range deck. I wouldn't even call it an aggro deck because I didn't have enough 2-drops. Mm-hmm. we're really, again, we're not living the high life over here. But what it did have was, well, it had a lot of copies of Run Amok. That's what it did have. And
yeah.
You know what? That is a good card. And I had my opponent's mulligan an above average number of times. I think I made some pretty good plays. This is why I love best of 3, by the way. I was playing against this Jund deck that had Valky in it, / Tybalt. And I got a hit in with Varagoth, and I was able to set it up so go get tutor for Carful Kennel Master, because this is among the best cards in my deck somehow, and just and then combine that with a Run Amok to play around the things they had, and turned out they didn't have Valky, but it would have been good if they did even. So I felt good about my play. I felt good about my deck building decisions because I'm very results oriented and I won money, so therefore I had to have done everything correctly. No. I think I made the best of a bad situation. I was thrilled to win $1,000. I believe my average record, if I took that same sealed pool and just played the Arena Open Day 2 over and over and over again, would be somewhere in the vicinity of 3 to 4 wins. Uh-huh. Just based on the average quality of decks that exist. And
I see.
Yeah.
So you overperformed.
I got away with it.
Yeah. How does he keep getting away with it? For me, like I said, I opened up a not only powerful, but pretty straightforward build. For my day 1 pool, for my first day 1 pool, primarily red-green, just had good stuff and was not a particularly difficult build. The mana was good. The cards were powerful, and I was able to make it into day 2 on that first effort. So that was great. Then I opened my pool on day 2, and boy, was it a headache. A bizarre pool. It was unlike any that I have opened in the format, and I have opened a lot of them. For example, every single one of my snowlands were duels. All of them. I had 6 snow duels and 1 Shimmer Drift fail. Now, normally I would be absolutely thrilled about this because most of the decks I build, I would say about 60% fall into that category that we talked about on last week's show, where it's 3 to 5 color snow. And so I'm like, great, let's do this. Well, then I didn't have any other fixing. I didn't have a Glimmering Frost or that kind of stuff. I'm okay. So that's a little bit of a bummer because dual lands can't necessarily carry you the whole way unless they're the right ones. So I put together a couple of builds, and I also had 2 or 3 Run Amok. I can't remember. But I had a red-green deck that actually ended up playing only the red-green duel and the Shimmer Drift fail and put all 4 of the other duels in the board. And of course, any powerful splashes that I had, I didn't play there either. And I thought it was close between a straightforward deck that actually kind of reminds me a little bit about how you described yours, Luis. It had a thing going for it, but it was definitely underpowered for the format. Versus the more greedy version, which had Orvar and those Run Amoks that I mentioned. And that's kind of a sweet combo to be able to start copying stuff and do that whole thing. And I ended up going for the greedier version. I think it was really close either way. And I went and I won my round 1 again in that real nail biter against our listener who came in. So I barely won that. And then I lost the next 2. And the second match was good and close. It was just a really good match that I ended up drawing a few too many lands, that whole kind of thing, but just a good close match that I lost. And then I played against Eric Severson in the last round, and he kind of crushed me. I had Toski in the deck, and I got one of those turns where you have 3 creatures in Toski, and I got to kill a creature and attack with all 3. 2 of them get in. I draw the cards, and I kind of think I'm 80% to win at this point. And then, you draw a few too many lands, your opponent makes some good plays or just affects the board a few too many times. And all of a sudden you're falling behind again. And that's what happened. And then in what ended up being the last game of my tournament, I missed some land drops, and then Eric used the Notvold. What is it called? The land?
The Slumber Mound.
Slumber Mound. And he, let's just say he put my tournament to sleep with that one as I missed some land drops. So a disappointing day 2 for me for sure. I went 1-2 and I was out. I was bummed about it. I mean, I handle these things okay, so it wasn't like a huge thing, but I definitely was hoping for a better finish than that, or at least to put myself in the running to try to make the money. And realistically, I wasn't even remotely close. So a little bit disappointed about that, but I was definitely thinking bigger picture, and I was picking up the energy from everybody on Twitter and my friends, and just everybody was into this. I mean, I was getting pools thrown at me. And, again, I just want to put that kind of punctuation mark here on the tournament. Excellent, super awesome. And it felt really successful. So I hope we see more of them. Luis, before, let's go on to talking about Kaldheim. We wanted to do kind of a check-in with the format because we talked about sealed last week, and draft format's always evolving and changing and stuff like that. And this also feels like the first week that we've got where the format really has kind of settled down a bit. I think it's more of a known quantity now. Draft formats evolve, so this will not necessarily stay the same for the rest of the format, but really the dust has settled on our initial questions and things are starting to become more clear. And I thought that before we give that big picture view, we could talk about the top 3 uncommons, because I heard you talking about it on your stream. It comes up on Twitter sometimes as well. And I think it would be kind of an interesting way to frame where we're at in the format and how things actually go. So
how long do you want me to wait before I point out you said top 3 uncommons?
Oh God! Right now it's good. It's just
okay. It's good.
Top 3 commons. Pardon me. Much more important than the top 3 uncommons, of course, are the top 3 commons. And I think that the community has narrowed it down to 3. I do not think that there's a consensus necessarily on the order in which they go, but the 3 I think that people tend to mention the most are Always Beholding, Serulf Snackmate, and Demon Bolt.
Nobody that I've seen has anything but those as the top 3.
You're right. Now, we should mention one card because I have seen some people ask you on your stream, and it's come up on Twitter as well, about what about, right, and Feed the Serpent is the card that they usually throw at us there. But the fact is that Feed the Serpent's not, like, it's not even number 4, I don't think. It's not on this list at all.
Does Feed the Serpent make the top 10?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I think it's like, you never don't play it. I think that while black might be the lowest power level, it's still a perfectly playable color. And I think it's a really powerful card.
Before we get to the ordering of the top 3, we've got these top 3.
Yeah.
We've got Squash. We've got Shimmerja Veil. We've got Bergstrider. That's already 6 cards that you'd take over Feed the Serpent.
Yeah, I think Feed the Serpent's like in the next 2, probably. Like, you could probably come up with.
I would take Mistwalker over it. Yeah, maybe it's 8th. Maybe it's
right in that range. Like, to me, it's close between that and Mistwalker. Pack one, pick one. I could see taking Mistwalker because it's blue. I'd rather be in that color. But I think Feed the Serpent's a better card, for example.
To be clear, it's not an unreasonable question to ask because the 2 black instant exile any creature or planeswalker, which does matter sometimes, is frequently going to be in the conversation for top common. The only reason it's not here is that black is, as a color, much weaker. And that of course, is the context that you might not have if you haven't been drafting 50 times. So I definitely don't want to make it sound like, oh, it's ridiculous to think Feed the Serpent would be that good. It just happens that cards like Mistwalker, because of all the different little format context things, are comparable at the very least to Feed the Serpent. And all these other cards are better. That's just how the format's shaking out. So
that's right. So what about the top 3? I'm going to tell you my order, Luis.
Yeah, you can go and tell me and tell everyone about my order too.
Okay, so I have Serulf's Packmate, Behold the Multiverse, then Demon Bolt.
Yeah, I fluctuated between Behold and Packmate, but I have Packmate as number 1. It's just too easy. It gets you card advantage and board presence, whereas Behold can be a liability when you need board presence. In the late game, I think Behold will do better, and the better your deck is, the better Behold gets relatively, because when you've got one of those really sick decks that has a lot of great removal spells, some good finishers, etc., then Behold is going to find you such high quality cards that it gets even better. Like it makes a bad deck better and it makes a good deck even better, which is a sign of a great card.
Yeah.
But Packmate's just the card you don't want to see when your opponent suspends it on turn 2 and plays it on turn 3. Whereas at least with Behold, sometimes you have an assertive draw and they cast Behold on turn 3 and you're like, yeah, that's not great, but I'm going to have 2 creatures on the board and a removal spell in hand. I can still punish them for doing that. There's no punishment when it comes to Packmate. That card is just always fantastic.
Yeah, and it really hits a thing that we come up across, like when we talk about the bombs in a set and we go for like A pluses and stuff, right? These are usually the cards that create a board presence that's very difficult to actually get killed through on the turn you do it. Now, Packmate doesn't do that. And it's not an A plus, right? But at the same time, it has those elements to it. And I think one way that you could view it, if you're having a hard time kind of like sorting out, but man, I get all these cards from the Behold the Multiverse, is both of them suspend. I always say suspend. Both of them foretell for 2, like everything. And then both of them cost 2 mana to cast the turn that you want to cast them. Okay, that's good. So a common play pattern is you foretell them on 2 and then play them on 3. That happens a lot. The difference is that one of them gives you ultimately 2 cards in your hand. One of them gives you 1 card in your hand and a 3/3 on board that you didn't have to pay any extra mana for. If you could turn your Behold the Multiverse into 2 mana, you get a card in your hand and then, you draw another card, but exile it and put a 3/3 on the battlefield. There's a lot of the time that you would much rather do that. Like if you're getting beaten down, if you need a board presence, if you need something right now, that you would exchange that extra card for a 3/3. And that's kind of what Packmate does. Now, things get twisted a little because you get the scry in there as well. And that does change the power level and, in fact, bumps it up. And that's why it's so close. But board presence matters in Limited a lot, right? Creatures are generally the most important things in Limited. And we all know what it's like to feel that pressure of an opponent who goes like 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, right? If you are going to spend a turn casting Behold and dumping 4 mana over the course of some amount of turns, 1 turn all at once or over 2 turns, you're going to feel that heat. And Packmate means you don't need to worry about it anymore. You have this really nice blocker and it's going to demand a card to get it out of the way or a combat trick, or it's going to trade with something in combat or whatever. And so that to me is why it's just slightly better, is that in those times when you're under pressure and you're finding yourself like trending towards being behind, the Packmate does a slightly better job because it stabilizes your board. Another way to look at it was like Behold the Multiverse has a slight win more element to it, and by comparison, because like it has a higher upside. It just does, right? You can dig deeper through your deck and find more expensive or more powerful or more specific spells. But a lot of times in Limited, you're getting beat down and you don't really worry about upside. You worry about survival. And in those situations, you basically always rather have the Packmate.
Yeah. I mean, Behold scales better in the late game. Like on turn 7, I think, and later on average, Behold is going to be quite a bit stronger. But one of the things I said on my stream, which actually kind of prompted this discussion, was it kind of doesn't matter. And I'm not saying that to say that this discussion was useless, but whether or not you take Behold or Packmate, pick one, pack one, I don't think will have too big of an effect on your win percentage. Of course, everyone wants to know what the best is, and that's the fun part to discuss. As you said, that's what podcasts are for.
Yeah.
But you're going to get a lot more mileage out of discussing the next couple comments, I think. And that's because you can't go wrong with Behold or Packmate. They're both just so good.
Yeah. Yep.
I have both of us have Demon Bolt at 3. I know that some people like Demon Bolt at 2 just because they think red's really good and this is more of a flexible card. It can go into red aggro or blue-red control, 5-color snow, whatever. I just think the 2-for-1s are too pushed to pass up. And even though Demon Bolt's a great card, it is just a removal spell. And there's plenty of times when you Demon Bolt something and both players feel, okay, that was a deal that happened. There's almost no times when my opponent casts a Packmate where I feel okay with it.
Yep.
It's not okay. And the same is true of Behold. Past that, I've got Bergstrider as number 4. Bergstrider just continues to rise. I don't think it's going to rise higher in the power rankings. I don't see it overtaking any of the top 3, but I've never found a deck that has too many. I've played 5 in a deck.
I'm kind of mad at you, by the way, about Bergstrider. that 1 in a red sorcery that made the 1/1 army and it bounced something. And I was like, I don't know. And you were like, this is like a little tiny mana war. And I was like, oh yeah, this is sweet. Right. Yeah. And then I liked it. Why didn't you just tell me that Bergstrider was just a big Frostlynx? You could have just told me this. Yeah, you could have just let me know, hey, how about a Frostlynx, but it's a 4/4? And I would have been like, oh yeah. Yeah. And that's what it is.
I forgot I had to use analogies to really get through.
Yeah, come on, help me out.
They're good teaching tools. But yeah, no, Bergstrider's fantastic. It just turns out you don't need much in the way of snow to make it work. Like even with 3 snow lands, it still does its thing. It's a giant, which is a valuable creature type to have. And you can't go wrong. It's splashable. I've splashed it in plenty of decks too. Yep. It's the kind of card that when you're winning and you play it, you're just crushing them. Yep. When you're losing and you play it, it's one of the few cards that can get you out of whatever situation you're in. And in a close game, it's like the kind of thing where like, I think I'm doing great here, unless they have a Bergstrider. Yeah, because it's like they added a 4/4 plus killed your biggest creature, at least for the short term.
And as you mentioned, they chain together very well too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They definitely do. Shimmerdrift Veil is number 5 for me. That's the come into play tapped any color snowland. It's just so flexible. It's just always going to be good. You play it in a 2-color deck, you play it in a snow deck. It's fantastic in the like 3+ color snow decks. It just does what you want to do. It helps splash even in like a 2-color deck. Sometimes you have the cheeky little splash there. And this is the one that falls off the most because there's no limit to how many of the top 4 commons I want, really, and they're all good at every point in the draft. Later in the draft, Shimmerdrift Veil might just not do anything for you. So, but when we're talking the first couple picks of a draft, this is at its best there because it's so open-ended. And then it gets murkier. I think Squash, then Mistraven, or Feed the Serpent. I wouldn't blame you for taking Feed. It's probably better than Mistraven overall. Pick one, pack one situation.
I wish I could have a Mistraven, but Mistwalker perhaps
or Mistwalker, sure. Yeah. And then past that, I don't think we're in the realm of being useful. We're again not being useful because if you don't open one of these top 8 commons and have no good uncommons and no good rares, then you've opened a pretty bad pack, and there's a bunch of other stuff on a lower tier, but there's no reason to compare it to the higher tier stuff. You're just not you're not making those decisions. Like, yeah, sometimes you do have to first pick like a Stalwart Valkyrie or a Goldvein pick or something like that, or a Bounding Gold is probably like the next best card. I think that would probably be like number 8 or 9. I guess actually I like Bounding Gold. Never mind, I kind of forgot about that one. Bounding Gold's actually better than Feed the Serpent or Mistwalker. Like I think pick one, pack one. So I guess that would be number 7, with those being 8 and 9. But once you get past that, you're talking about a bunch of different cards that are just worse. And at that point, the pick one, pack one thing falls apart because you're just not going to pick one of those cards very often. It's hard to miss on everything.
Yeah, we should remind, you touched on it just a minute ago, but we should really hammer that point home, right? That there's a reason that Luis and I don't do pick orders on this show and that we don't focus strategic energy on things like this. What you can gain out of this, if you're listening to us talk about this, the things that you can gain from discussions like this are how we approach making these lists and why we chose the cards to sit where they sit. But if you have the idea of using a list to help you draft, don't. It is not going to help you. The issue with it is that it's relevant for pack one, pick one, perhaps, right? Let's say you opened a pack with Packmate, Behold the Multiverse, Demon Bolt, Bergstrider, and Shimmerdrift Veil. Well, then maybe, you could make the optimal pick according to us and take Sorrel's Packmate. As Luis said, you just took, like, for that pack, 100 out of 100. Always Beholding is a 98. So it didn't really matter. Demon Bolt's a 90. It's like they're right up there with each other where you're really not giving up much equity either way. So that's not a great place to focus. And on top of it, your next pick, this whole list goes out the door, right? Because the draft is so dynamic that you are drafting things for the deck that your deck needs and not necessarily based off of some, algorithmic power level order of the card. So that's why we don't do that on this show. We are trying, teach you how to fish, right? We don't want to give you fishes and say, here's a list of cards. Now go be a good algorithm and pick from it. It doesn't work. You will have worse decks if you try to do that. No. And the sources that give you that, I think, are are doing you actually a disservice, even if it feels like it's informational.
I completely agree. That's why I post my pick orders on Channel Fireball every Sunday.
But there, again,
I am doing a set wide pick one, pack one order.
But if you expect people to use it, right, as like an algorithmic thing, well, you're not helping them, right? But if you expect people to look at it and go, here's why these cards are important in the format, and not actually use it as their pick, then it does have some value, like our discussion here, I think.
I think it's a two-pronged approach. I think this is overall going to get you there more, but it's also useful sometimes to just have a page and look at here's every card in every color ranked, so I know roughly what the relative values are, especially when it comes to the higher rarity cards. Because we're not spending a lot of time talking about Draugr Necromancer versus Feed the Serpent, right? Because that's just not a pick that's like really relevant to talk about. But it happens that Necromancer is quite a bit better. You might not know that if you hadn't played with the card.
That's true.
Or Varagoth versus Behold the Multiverse. So I think there is some value in that too. But I agree with you. I mean, there's a reason we don't harp on pick orders too much. But
no, that is true. And this is the one place where I do see pick orders used effectively is with professional players. Right. I mean, because they have the skill set to interpret all of that and understand that by pack 3, this pick order thing is of minimal use to me. But if I haven't been able to draft the format in the PTs tomorrow, and you tell me, hey, I know this Draugr Necromancer might not look as good as a removal spell, or you might be questioning it. It actually is, and this list is going to give you that information. Then that is informational. So there is a time and a place for that kind of stuff. I agree.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we kind of started doing this because we had one of the people on our team at a PT take, I'm going to names and cards change to protect the innocent. Take a basically pretty bad rare over one of the best commons. And later we were like, wow, we should try to do what we can to like make sure that doesn't happen, because it's like, it would have been pretty easy. Cause it's like, if you haven't played with a rare and you're like, you open it and you're like, it's a time draft. You're like, do I take this rare? I've never played with it. It looks powerful, but I don't know. And you end up in a spot where you don't have the ability to make that decision under those constraints. It is useful to have a pick order and say like, hey, look, these are the bomb rares. These are the bad rares. What we actually would always do is like, what's the best uncommon? What's the best common? Then put all the rares in between all those basically tiers.
Right.
And that is useful. I think that there is some very good uses from
particularly if you already are good at drafting. Where if you're learning how to be a good drafter, then this is not going to teach you that, right? Like you couldn't hand that to a player who didn't really understand how booster draft worked at a fundamental level or was still learning and expect them to be able to interpret that. You're not going to tell us the name or the cards? Not even the card? Not even the rare? Give us the common. What common was
the rare was was a dragon form or dragon storm, whichever the like overload, make one of your creatures into a 4/4 dragon until end of turn was.
Okay, we'll have to live with that. All right.
it was not a particularly good rare, but it looks powerful. It's exactly the kind of thing that would fall you into a trap, right?
Right, exactly. And that is the trickiest part, particularly under a short time frame.
So getting away from pick order is your favorite subject. So big picture, it's funny. If you look at me voting with my wallet, Kaldheim is the set I've enjoyed the most in the past 2 years. I have played more matches of Kaldheim, and this is, by the way, discounting the Arena Open, not counting the Arena Open's effect at all, because I think that does confound the data. If you look at just how many times I drafted, and even before I knew the Open was going to happen, this is the set I've had the most fun drafting over the past 2 years. I have done more drafts of this than any other set.
And I am not surprised to hear that. This was somewhat predicted by us, right, with the complexity level that this set has.
Yeah, and there's just a lot. I think the gameplay, for me, the gameplay is a really big part of it. I mean, obviously, that is a big part of it for everyone. And I like the way the games play out. I think the games play out interestingly. The snow deck is the exact kind of deck I really enjoy playing, because you're like looking at, can I fit in the second white source to splash the activation of Great Hall of Starnheim? When should I take, Path of the World Tree versus taking my Demon Bolt? Like, these are the kind of decisions I like making.
Yeah.
That being said, it's a little surprising to me because it kind of feels like it's a 2-deck format. It's not that simple, but it kind of is close to that, where on the one hand there's snow, and then on the other hand there's like red aggro, and those are like the two pillars of the format. What I think makes Kaldheim interesting, and the reason it's not that simple and that's not where it is the snow decks take a lot of different forms. There's 2 to 5 color snow. There's blue red giants, which could actually either be an aggressive deck or a controlling snow deck, so it kind of lands in both camps. Mm-hmm. And the snow decks like play a wide variety of cards, so they don't get too stale. You could draft 2 snow decks that are basically not the same at all, without the exception of a few core cards. It's not for everyone, but I actually enjoy the balance of drafting lands versus spells. Like I that's a big part of Cube for me, is like taking Polluted Delta, over a Mana Leak and feeling like I made the right choice, and that happens here. And then there are fringe decks that don't happen or don't come together that often, but actually are playable when they do. We're talking Black-Green Elves, Black-White. I think my estimation of Black-White actually continues to go down. I'm starting to think it's just a trap. But Black-Green Elves, kind of like Blue-Green Changelings, though that obviously like kind of devolves into snow all the time. Green-White aggro, and then and Black-Red aggro, with White-Red aggro being the other big headliner. And that's enough variety between snow and white-red aggro are like kind of distinct enough that they feel like very different experiences. You have blue-red giants, and then you have all these fringe decks, and the snow decks do a lot of different things. And that's kind of where I see the format's at, where when you look at your picks early, you should be looking at ways to get into snow and ways to get into red aggro, and not ways to get into like elves or black-white or green-white or any of these other decks, though sometimes it will be correct to play those decks. That can always happen.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've also continued to play it nonstop after I got over the complexity sort of speed bump at the beginning. Yeah, I mean, the things that we predicted early on about how for players like us, complexity is actually a better thing. We love cube drafting, which is the most complex probably with, of any type of format you can do. And that has played true for me as well. If I had to describe the set though, I would call it messy. So many of the archetypes just flopped. I think that the format is snow dominated. And I don't like that. I'm not with you on the picking lands thing. Yeah, I like to feel clever when I do it in cube draft, but here I'm picking basics. Like, these are not interesting cards at all. They don't even fetch or do something that fills up my graveyard or, whatever. Get me a delve thing. It's just a basic land that has a couple of different words on it. I don't like having to pick those early. And I also really don't like the feeling that you might start to go down a path that simply won't be there for you, that there's no out for you if you decide, okay, I guess I'm going to be the snow deck, and then 2 other people are in it, and you get to pick 4 and the snow land's gone, and you just sort of picked 3 cards to start off with that really matter for snow. And if you don't have the snow, don't do anything, or just greatly diminished. That's a feel bad. And it just makes me not want to go down that road, but you have to. Like, I draft snow most of the time in the format, and they did, to their credit, balance it out enough so that you do not have to, one of our big questions was, do you have to be turbo snow to make it work? And the answer is no. They did put enough stuff in that lets you be snow, but not have to commit every single pick to it. But a lot of the cards kind of are like that they really do care about snow, and you really don't want them in your deck unless you have, say, 5 or 6 snow lands at the minimum, and ideally a few more than that. And that to me is just kind of sloppy. I don't like setting my foot on a path that could be really exciting, but could really flop and kind of make my draft not fun at all without really much of an off ramp, right? If I have a few Icehide Trolls and another thing that really cares about snow, like a Icebind Pillar or something like that, out of my first few picks, and I don't end up in snow, those are just gone. Like, I don't even get to play them, or if I do, I'm miserable, and I don't like that. So, the format's really two-edged sword for me at this point, because I have absolutely enjoyed playing it, but I'm trying to also look at it from perspectives that aren't just my own, it of course goes beyond what people like you and I like,
Yeah, I like I said, I think you're more prone to do that than I do. I'm a little less prescriptive when it comes to that. But at the end of the day, I'm enjoying it a lot. So even if that I have reasons I could state that I wouldn't be enjoying it as much, I am enjoying it. So I'm not looking for reasons to convince myself that I'm not. I know you're not doing that. I'm just saying when I think about it from the perspective of wow, I draft Snow most of the time, and Snow and Red Aggro are the two biggest decks by a lot. That doesn't sound like a format I would do 75 drafts in, but I've done 75 Kaldheim drafts or more, and I am not done with it. I'm still enjoying it. I've got a draft that I'm looking forward to finishing after the show, though I've got to eat my vegetables first and play test a little bit more for the league weekend.
Oh, I so thought you were going to say eat your vegetables and record CR, but.
No.
Come on, man. It's not like you to give up a good dig on VK like that,
Yeah, but that would be more like having to, eat something that I dropped on the ground and left there for an hour.
Yes, we got there. All right. Well, why don't we call this little dessert hour over here for you, because you do have some other stuff to do, and we covered all the stuff that we wanted to talk about. Let us know what you think as well. I mentioned on the last show to show us your pools and let us know how you did. And I did want to just say a quick thank you and congratulations and awesome stuff to everybody who made it to day 2 and who did well in it. We got so much awesome tweets and emails and stuff of people saying, hey, I cashed this event. I'm so happy. Thanks for the show and stuff. And, Luis and I were just glowing all weekend as a result of that, because it is so cool to see the work and the focus that we put in on the show actually translate to our listeners having success at these things, even monetary success in some cases, right? Getting $1,000 or $2,000. And we were really thrilled to see a huge number. I was really shocked. I was like, wow, a lot of our listeners really crushed it. And, that's always great to see. So congratulations to everybody for that. And we'll all look forward to the next, Arena Open that is the limited format whenever that may come. If you want to find us on social media, by the way, I am Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. And don't forget to check out Channel Fireball. That's a place you can go for really anything you need magic related. If you do head over there, if you would use the affiliate code LR, I'd appreciate it. That's on any purchase. If you sign up for CFB Pro, where you can get premium content on the CFB site. If you buy anything, if you do a box break, any of that kind of stuff, use that code LR and it helps out the show and we appreciate it. That will do it for this episode of Limited Resources. We'll be back next week, though. We'll see you then.
So I was reminded of a pretty funny story that happened at PT Amsterdam in 2010. And it was kicked off by Martin, who actually, funnily enough, was one of the people I tested with for that PT, asking, what's the worst card you ever did well with?
Is this the Jizam Jin you're talking about?
Yeah, Martin Yuza. Mm-hmm. What's the worst card you ever did well with in a tournament, in a constructed tournament?
Oh, and, this is good.
Well,
you must have gone very low. What have you done?
So first of all, it was great because Ben Stark replied with a Weaselback Redcap, and Sam Purdy pointed out the prompt was asking you. It. No. Sam pointed out the prompt was asking you which card you did well with.
Oh no! Oh no! Poor Ben just walked into that one. Brutal.
Crushed by it. So my initial answer was Loam Dryad, which I top-aided PTSOI with, but Paulo found the actual right answer, which was when we, in our PT Hawaii deck, Shards of Alara block constructed, played one copy of Progenitus to hardcast to win the mirror, and a 5-color control mirror. And
you did?
It was, so this is, I think, the actual most unlikely thing that's ever happened to me in a game of Magic, where I played the 5-color control mirror, I hardcast Progenitus, my opponent countered it. I cast Traumatic Visions to counter their counterspell. So you know what Traumatic Visions is?
It's a 5-mana one, right?
It's a 5-mana counterspell with cycling. They countered again, and I cast my second Traumatic Visions to counter their counter.
Okay.
So I had 20 mana in play.
Right. I was going to say, wait, this is a turn that you cast Progenitus? Okay.
And then they had a third counter.
Oh my God.
So Progenitus got countered. Then next turn, I drew and cast Progenitus.
That's amazing.
So somehow that wasn't even the story I set out to tell. But yes, that is the most unlikely thing. But so this is PT Amsterdam. This is extended. But it was a weird format where like the lands that were legal were kind of bizarre. Like they had just rotated out some stuff. So fetch lands weren't legal. And we were trying to figure out what to play. And this is actually kind of like the tournament before Team CFB became a team, but it was kind of the same squad, like Martin and Paulo and me and Kibler and Brad, like that group of folks. And at some point, Kibler, as usual, is building just like some kind of like feces mid-range deck, and he was he was trying to put together a beatdown deck that used Doran. So Doran the Explorer it's white, black, green for an 0/5 Treefolk, but it also says all of your creatures deal damage equal to their toughness.
So 3 mana 5/5.
And he wanted to play it because it was a 3 mana 5/5, which back then was actually pretty good. You wanted to play that and like some Thought Seizes and some Lone Lions. That's a 1 mana 2/3 if you've got a forest in play. And we're like, okay. And at one point, he's like, I think I want to try Treefolk Harbinger.
Yeah.
And this is 1 green mana for a 0/3. And when it enters the battlefield, you can put a Treefolk on top of your deck. Or a forest, actually.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, because it could go get that duel.
Yes, Murmuring Bosk was actually one of the only good lands in the deck. It was a black, white, green land that entered untapped only if you had a Treefolk in your hand. And so, you had the ability to go get your land or to get Doran. But the thing is, Doran would also make the Treefolk Harbinger into a 3/3. Mm-hmm. And he suggested this card, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm not going to put Treefolk Harbinger in my deck. And then I start playing it, and then I'm like, after a day, I'm like, oh my God, okay, fine. I'm not going to play more than 2 Treefolk Harbingers. All right. And so at this point, we're already in Amsterdam, by the way. And the whole team is there. We all decided we want to play this deck. A day later, I'm trying to figure out where we can get 40 copies of Treefolk Harbinger because every single one of us is going to play the deck because the deck was actually really good. Kibler ended up making top 8. He beat me playing for top 8. I actually made a pretty grievous error against him. So if you want to think about the topic of errors, I just made I basically should have chump blocked at one turn, didn't, and it set against a Chameleon Colossus and set myself up to have to make a really bad, like no attack a couple turns later, or I would have died. But I ended up making top 16. He made top 8. But we were there in Amsterdam. We're trying to figure out how to get enough Treefolk Harbingers for everybody. And at one point, we discussed having one of the guys from Channel Fireball fly over from the U.S. because we're like, doing the math. All right, so a flight would be $800. He's willing to overnight. Just come because it's a cool story, and he'd get a couple days in Amsterdam. He would crash with us. Alex Alpin, great guy. But we ended up deciding, okay, we called all the game stores. We found this one has 12, so we like immediately like cab over there and go get them. And we're like, all right, I think we're gonna be good. The dealers are gonna be on site on Thursday. But we obviously appreciated the fact that he was willing to hop on a plane and smuggle a bunch of trees into Amsterdam, which is funny given Amsterdam's reputation as well.
Usually the trees go the other way, but yeah.
Right. And so then we had a bunch of them. And at this point, I'd already locked up mine because,
all 4 copies for you?
All 4 copies. Oh, yeah. I'd been motivated. Yeah. Oh, it was great in the deck.
It really was.
It was a 1 mana 3/3 that searched up your best card.
Yep.
And sometimes you'd even, and this is embarrassing, you'd play it on turn 1 to get a second one. So you could play it on turn 2 to get the Doran so you could play an attack for 6. So then we get to the site, and at this point, we're all like, all right, secret mission. We're going to have to go grab as many Treefolk Harbingers as possible. It doesn't matter if people know that we're doing that. We just got to get them. And at one point, one of the members of our team found someone who was like, oh, yeah, I could lend you 4 of those, one of his friends. And they go to get them, and he hands the person on our team the 4 copies of Harbinger. He's like, so what are you going to play this in? And he's like, well, I'm going to play this deck. And it's like, wow, that deck sounds pretty good. And he's like looking at the Treefolk Harbingers that he just handed. And he's like, yeah, you're not getting these back. You lent these to me.
Oh, my God. That's incredible.
And so it wasn't, as it turns out, Treefolk Harbinger wasn't the worst card I've ever played. Progenitus was the actual worst card, but it was that whole evolution was really something. And it was funny because, again, this was before Team CFB had really formed, and we had like rented this like flat, and there was all these people just coming in and out, all these random like Magic players, like not just random people off the street, but like we didn't care. Like, you know, at some point, like a crew of people showed up, and everyone's like, "What are you guys doing with all these Treefolk Harbingers? This doesn't make any sense." And like, I don't know, it was a different time. It was a wild time, and we ended up doing quite well with the deck. It was a great choice, and it was a great story too.
I love it.